Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we journey back through millennia to explore one of antiquity's most fascinating civilizations. The Phoenicians were maritime merchants, skilled craftsmen, and cultural innovators whose influence shaped the ancient Mediterranean world. Their story unfolds across centuries of trade, exploration, and remarkable achievements. So settle comfortably, close your eyes, and let us drift through time together. Our tale begins along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, in a land of cedar-covered mountains and natural harbors. This narrow coastal strip, roughly corresponding to modern-day Lebanon, became home to the Phoenicians around 1500 BCE. The name Phoenician itself comes from the Greek word phoenix, meaning purple or crimson, referring to the famous Tyrian purple dye that would become their trademark commodity. The Phoenician homeland was blessed with natural advantages. Deep harbors provided safe anchorage for vessels. The nearby Lebanon mountains offered abundant cedar trees, prized throughout the ancient world for their quality and durability. Between mountains and sea, the Phoenicians carved out their civilization, establishing independent city-states that would become legendary. The earliest Phoenician settlements emerged during the Bronze Age, developing from Canaanite culture. These coastal communities shared linguistic and cultural ties with their inland neighbors, but were distinguished by their maritime focus. The sea called to them, offering opportunities that landlocked existence could never provide. Generation after generation, they answered that call, becoming the ancient world's preeminent sailors and traders. Phoenician civilization was not a unified empire, but rather a collection of independent city-states. Each maintained its own government, religious practices, and commercial interests, though they shared common language, customs, and heritage. 3 cities rose above all others in prominence and power. Tyre stood as perhaps the most famous Phoenician city. Built partly on an island offshore, Tyre's position made it nearly impregnable to attack. Its double harbor system allowed ships to dock regardless of wind direction. The city's wealth grew immense through trade and the production of purple dye, extracted painstakingly from thousands of murex sea snails. Tyrian merchants sailed throughout the Mediterranean, establishing trading posts and colonies that extended Phoenician influence across vast distances. Sidon, located north of Tyre, served as another major commercial hub. Its artisans were renowned for their glasswork, creating vessels and objects of breathtaking beauty. Sidonian craftsmen also excelled in metalworking, textiles, and ivory carving. The city's workshops produced luxury goods coveted by royalty and aristocrats throughout the ancient world. Egyptian pharaohs, Assyrian kings, and Greek nobles all sought Sidonian craftsmanship. Byblos holds special significance as one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in human history. Its connections with Egypt stretched back to the earliest dynasties. Egyptian vessels regularly sailed to Byblos seeking cedar wood for construction and shipbuilding. In return, Byblos received Egyptian papyrus in such quantities that the Greek word for book, biblios, derives from the city's name. This cultural exchange enriched both civilizations, creating bonds that lasted centuries. The Phoenicians transformed maritime navigation and trade. Before their innovations, seafaring remained largely coastal, with ships hugging shorelines and avoiding open water. Phoenician sailors changed everything. They studied the stars, learned to navigate by celestial observation, and ventured far beyond sight of land. Their courage and skill opened new trade routes across the Mediterranean and beyond. Phoenician ships were marvels of ancient engineering. Their merchant vessels featured broad hulls for maximum cargo capacity, with sturdy construction that could withstand fierce storms. A single large square sail provided propulsion, while oars allowed maneuvering in calm conditions or tight harbors. The famous Bahrain warships carried 2 rows of oarsmen, achieving speeds that made them formidable in battle. Cedar planking ensured durability, while the hull design balanced stability with maneuverability. These master mariners established trading networks spanning incredible distances. Phoenician ships reached Cyprus, Crete, Sicily, Sardinia, and the distant shores of Spain. They ventured through the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic Ocean, establishing contact with communities far beyond the Mediterranean basin. Some historians believe Phoenician expeditions may have reached Britain in search of tin, essential for bronze production. The Phoenicians didn't merely trade, they established permanent settlements. Colonies sprouted along trade routes, serving as way stations and commercial outposts. These colonies maintained ties with their mother cities while developing their own identities. The relationship was mutually beneficial, with colonies providing resources and markets, while mother cities offered manufactured goods and cultural connection. Among all Phoenician colonies, one surpassed the rest to become a power rivaling and eventually exceeding its founders. Carthage, established by Tyrian colonists around 814 BCE, grew from a trading post into one of the ancient world's greatest civilizations. Legend attributes its founding to Princess Elissa, also known as Dido, who fled Tyre following political intrigue and fraternal conflict. The founding story, preserved by Roman historians, tells of Dido's cleverness in securing land. Local rulers agreed to grant her only as much territory as could be encompassed by an ox hide. Dido cut the hide into thin strips and used them to outline a large area, establishing the city's first boundaries. Whether historical fact or mythological embellishment, the tale captures the Phoenician reputation for shrewd negotiation and resourcefulness. Carthage's location on the North African coast proved ideal. The city commanded trade routes between the eastern and western Mediterranean. Its double harbor system, carved from the coastline, could accommodate hundreds of vessels. The circular military harbor, hidden from external view, housed Carthage's powerful navy. Meanwhile, the rectangular merchant harbor bustled with commercial activity as goods flowed in and out ceaselessly. The Carthaginians, as they became known, inherited and expanded upon Phoenician maritime prowess. Their ships dominated western Mediterranean waters. They established colonies in Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearic Islands, and throughout coastal North Africa and Spain. These settlements created a commercial empire that brought tremendous wealth to Carthage. The city's population swelled, eventually reaching several 100,000 inhabitants. Carthaginian society blended Phoenician traditions with African and Mediterranean influences. The city maintained worship of traditional Phoenician deities, particularly Baal Hammon and Tanit. However, Carthaginian culture developed distinct characteristics. Their military organization, political structure, and social customs evolved to meet the challenges of their expanded role. Carthage became not merely a colony, but a civilization in its own right. Perhaps the Phoenicians' most enduring contribution to human civilization was their alphabet. Previous writing systems, like Egyptian hieroglyphics and Mesopotamian cuneiform, required learning hundreds or thousands of symbols. These complex systems limited literacy to specialized scribes who spent years mastering the intricate characters. The Phoenicians revolutionized written communication through radical simplification. The Phoenician alphabet contained only 22 characters, each representing a consonant sound. This phonetic approach meant that anyone could learn to read and write relatively quickly. The system was elegant and efficient, perfectly suited to the Phoenicians' commercial needs. Merchants could keep accounts, record contracts, and communicate across distances without requiring specialized scribal training. This alphabetic innovation spread rapidly throughout the Mediterranean world. The Greeks adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet, adding vowels to create their own writing system. From Greek, the alphabet passed to the Etruscans and Romans. The Latin alphabet, descended directly from Phoenician origins through these intermediaries, eventually became the most widespread writing system in human history. Today, billions of people use alphabets that trace their ancestry to those Phoenician merchants who simplified writing for practical purposes. The alphabet democratized knowledge and communication. Ideas could spread more freely when writing was accessible to more people. Literature, philosophy, science, and law all benefited from this innovation. The Phoenicians, focused on trade and commerce, likely never imagined the profound impact their practical invention would have on human civilization. Phoenician religious life centered on a pantheon of deities, associated with natural forces and celestial bodies. Baal, whose name simply means Lord, served as a primary deity, associated with storms, fertility, and agriculture. Different cities worshipped various manifestations of Baal, each with local characteristics and cult practices. Tyre particularly venerated Melkart, their version of Baal, whom later Greeks identified with Heracles. The goddess Astarte held equally important status, representing fertility, sexuality, and warfare. Her worship involved elaborate rituals and festivals. Temple priestesses served the goddess, maintaining her sanctuaries and conducting ceremonies. The Phoenicians believed Astarte's favor brought prosperity, successful harvests, and victory in battle. Her influence extended throughout the Mediterranean as Phoenician traders and colonists spread her worship. Phoenician temples were architectural marvels, though few survive today. These structures combined religious function with economic power, as temples often served as banks and treasuries. Priests wielded considerable political influence, advising rulers and managing temple wealth. The most famous temple, dedicated to Melkart in Tyre, was renowned throughout the ancient world. Pilgrims traveled from distant lands to worship there and present offerings. Religious practices included animal sacrifice, with altars receiving offerings of sheep, cattle, and birds. Ritual meals followed sacrifices, with worshippers consuming portions while dedicating others to the gods. Incense, wine, and grain offerings accompanied prayers and petitions. Religious festivals punctuated the year, bringing communities together in celebration and worship. The infamous practice of child sacrifice remains controversial among historians. Ancient sources, particularly hostile Greek and Roman accounts, describe Phoenician and Carthaginian sacrifice of children to Baal Hammon. Archaeological evidence from burial grounds called tapets suggests ritual child burials occurred, though whether these represented sacrifice or infant mortality remains debated. Modern scholarship approaches this sensitive topic carefully, acknowledging evidence while recognizing potential bias in ancient sources. Phoenician artisans achieved legendary status throughout the ancient world. Their products commanded premium prices and adorned palaces from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Multiple industries flourished in Phoenician cities, each contributing to their economic prosperity and cultural reputation. The production of Tyrian purple exemplifies Phoenician industrial sophistication. This precious dye, extracted from murex sea snails, produced a color ranging from deep crimson to violet purple. Creating 1 pound of dye required processing thousands of snails. Workers would collect the mollusks, extract a tiny gland, and then process it through a complex procedure involving fermentation and careful temperature control. The rarity and labor intensity made Tyrian purple extraordinarily expensive. Only royalty and the wealthiest individuals could afford garments dyed in this color, which became synonymous with imperial power and luxury. Glassmaking represented another Phoenician specialty. While they didn't invent glass, Phoenician craftsmen refined techniques and created beautiful objects. Their glassblowers produced vessels, beads, and decorative items. Colored glass, achieved through metallic additives, created stunning effects. Phoenician glass goods traveled throughout the Mediterranean, bringing beauty and utility to distant markets. Metalworking showcased Phoenician technical mastery. Gold and silver jewelry of exquisite delicacy emerged from their workshops. Skilled craftsmen created intricate filigree work, granulation, and cloisonné pieces. Bronze and iron implements combined functionality with aesthetic appeal. Phoenician smiths supplied weapons, tools, and luxury goods to diverse customers. Their reputation for quality meant that Phoenician bronze became a mark of excellence. Ivory carving achieved extraordinary heights in Phoenician hands. Artisans imported elephant tusks from Africa and carved them into decorative panels, furniture inlays, and small sculptures. The Nimrud ivories discovered in ancient Assyrian palaces demonstrate the skill of Phoenician and Syrian carvers. These pieces blend Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Phoenician artistic traditions, showing cultural synthesis alongside technical expertise. Textile production employed thousands of workers. Beyond the famous purple fabrics, Phoenician weavers created fine linens and colorful wool textiles. Embroidery and decorative techniques enhanced their products. The textile industry supported related trades, including spinning, dyeing, fulling, and tailoring. This economic sector provided employment while generating substantial export revenue. The Phoenician city-states existed in a world dominated by powerful empires. Their location made them valuable allies or tempting targets for expansionist neighbors. Throughout their history, Phoenicians navigated complex diplomatic relationships, balancing independence with pragmatic accommodation. Egypt maintained long-standing connections with Phoenicia, particularly Byblos. During the New Kingdom period, Egyptian influence was strong, though Phoenician cities retained autonomy. Trade flowed freely between the regions. Lebanese cedar built Egyptian temples and ships. Egyptian papyrus filled Phoenician markets. Cultural exchange enriched both civilizations. Egyptian artistic motifs influenced Phoenician crafts, while Phoenician maritime expertise impressed Egyptian observers. The Assyrian Empire posed greater challenges. As Assyrian power expanded westward, Phoenician cities faced difficult choices. Resistance meant destruction. Submission meant tribute and loss of autonomy. Most Phoenician cities chose accommodation, paying tribute to Assyrian kings in exchange for trade privileges and nominal independence. Assyrian records document these arrangements, listing silver, gold, ivory, and textiles flowing from Phoenician cities to Nineveh. King Hiram of Tyre cultivated friendship with King Solomon of Israel during the 10th century BCE. This alliance brought mutual benefits. Solomon received cedar wood and skilled craftsmen for his temple construction. Hiram gained access to trade routes through Israelite territory and shared profits from joint maritime ventures. The biblical account describes their cooperation warmly, presenting it as a model of international friendship. Archaeological evidence supports the historicity of this relationship, though details remain debated. When the Neo-Babylonian Empire succeeded Assyria, Phoenician cities continued their pattern of tributary relationships. King Nebuchadnezzar II besieged Tyre for 13 years, though the island city's defenses proved formidable. Eventually, accommodation was reached, with Tyre acknowledging Babylonian suzerainty while maintaining internal autonomy and commercial activities. Persian conquest brought significant changes. The Achaemenid Empire incorporated Phoenicia into its vast domain around 539 BCE. However, Persian rule proved relatively benign. The Persians valued Phoenician naval expertise, incorporating Phoenician ships and sailors into their fleet. Phoenician cities enjoyed considerable autonomy under Persian administration, continuing their commercial activities while providing naval support for Persian military campaigns. The arrangement worked well for both parties, lasting until Alexander's conquests. The coming of Alexander the Great transformed the Mediterranean world. His conquest of the Persian Empire brought Phoenicia under Macedonian control. Most Phoenician cities submitted peacefully, recognizing Alexander's overwhelming military superiority. Tyre, however, chose resistance, confident in its island location and fortifications. Alexander's siege of Tyre in 332 BCE became one of history's most famous military operations. The Macedonian king demanded entry to sacrifice at Tyre's temple of Melkart, which the Tyrians refused, recognizing this as a ploy to occupy their city. Alexander determined to take Tyre by force, but the island position created unique challenges. No army could simply march in. Alexander ordered construction of a causeway, a massive engineering project connecting the island to the mainland. His soldiers labored for months, dumping stones and timber into the water. Tyrian ships harassed the workers, slowing progress. Eventually, Alexander assembled a fleet from other Phoenician cities and blockaded Tyre from the sea. The causeway reached the island's walls, and siege engines began their work. After 7 months, Tyre's defenses crumbled. Macedonian soldiers breached the walls and poured into the city. Alexander's fury at Tyrian resistance resulted in terrible retribution. Thousands were killed, thousands more sold into slavery. The ancient city, proud of its near-impregnable position, fell to Macedonian determination and engineering prowess. The causeway remained, permanently connecting the former island to the mainland, where it remains today as a wider peninsula. Following Alexander's conquests, Phoenician cities entered the Hellenistic world. Greek culture increasingly influenced local traditions. Greek language spread among educated classes. Phoenician and Greek artistic styles merged. Yet Phoenician identity persisted, especially in religious practices and commercial activities. The cities adapted to their new reality, incorporating Greek elements while maintaining cultural continuity. Roman expansion eventually brought Phoenicia into their empire. The region became part of the province of Syria, organized under Roman administration. Roman rule brought stability, infrastructure improvements, and integration into the broader Mediterranean economy. Roads connected Phoenician cities to the wider empire. Roman law governed commerce and civic life. Latin joined Greek and Aramaic as languages of administration. Paradoxically, as the Phoenician homeland became increasingly Romanized, their greatest colony faced Rome in one of history's most famous conflicts. Carthage's rise to power in the western Mediterranean brought it into competition with Rome's own expansion. Control of Sicily, strategic importance of sea routes, and commercial rivalry created tensions that erupted into warfare. The Punic Wars, spanning over a century, pitted Carthage against Rome in a struggle for Mediterranean supremacy. The First Punic War centered on naval conflicts and Sicily's control. Rome, traditionally a land power, built a fleet and learned naval warfare to challenge Carthaginian maritime dominance. After decades of fighting, Rome emerged victorious, gaining Sicily as its first overseas province. The Second Punic War brought Hannibal Barca, one of history's greatest military commanders. Hannibal's audacious strategy involved invading Italy by land, crossing the Alps with an army including war elephants. For years, Hannibal campaigned through Italy, winning brilliant tactical victories. However, Rome's superior resources and resilient strategy eventually prevailed. The Romans counterattacked, carrying war to North Africa. At Zama, Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal, ending Carthaginian hopes of victory. The Third Punic War resulted from Roman determination to eliminate their old rival permanently. Carthage, already weakened and constrained by treaty, posed little real threat. Nevertheless, Roman hardliners, epitomized by Cato the Elder's famous declaration, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, pushed for final war. In 146 BCE, Roman forces destroyed Carthage completely. The city was burned, its population killed or enslaved, and according to legend, salt was sown into the earth to prevent rebuilding. The Phoenician presence in the western Mediterranean ended. The Phoenicians left indelible marks on human civilization, despite their political disappearance. Their alphabet, as discussed, fundamentally transformed human communication. Nearly every modern alphabetic writing system traces ancestry to Phoenician origins. This gift alone justifies their importance in history. Their maritime innovations influenced subsequent seafaring traditions. Navigation techniques, ship designs, and trade route knowledge passed to Greeks and Romans. The expansion of Mediterranean commerce owed much to Phoenician pioneering. They proved that long-distance sea trade was feasible and profitable, inspiring others to follow. Religious influences spread through Phoenician colonies and trade contacts. Worship of Phoenician deities influenced Greek and Roman religions. Melkart merged with Heracles. Astarte influenced Greek Aphrodite. Religious practices and mythological narratives crossed cultural boundaries, enriched by Phoenician contributions. Artistic traditions showed Phoenician influence across the Mediterranean. Their synthesis of Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Aegean styles created distinctive works that inspired others. Craftsmanship techniques, particularly in metalworking, glass production, and textile manufacturing, spread through apprenticeship and observation. The standards of quality associated with Phoenician products set benchmarks for others. Urban planning concepts developed in Phoenician cities influenced later settlements. The double harbor system, commercial districts, temple complexes, and residential quarters showed sophisticated urban organization. Carthage particularly demonstrated advanced city planning that Romans studied and emulated. Commercial practices including contracts, banking services, insurance concepts, and partnership arrangements traced to Phoenician merchants. Their pragmatic approach to business, emphasis on networks and reputation, and willingness to adapt to local conditions created templates for international trade. Modern commerce owes debts to these ancient pioneers. Understanding Phoenician identity requires recognizing its complexity. Phoenician was primarily an external designation used by Greeks. The Phoenicians themselves identified by city as Tyrians, Sidonians, or Biblians. They shared linguistic and cultural bonds, but maintained fierce civic pride and political independence. This decentralized structure proved both strength and weakness. It allowed flexibility and resilience, but prevented unified response to external threats. Language united Phoenician peoples. Phoenician belonged to the Northwest Semitic language family, closely related to Hebrew and Aramaic. Written in their consonantal alphabet, Phoenician evolved over centuries, developing regional variations. Punic, spoken in Carthage and Western colonies, represented a Western dialect that diverged from Eastern Phoenician. Despite differences, mutual intelligibility remained, facilitating communication across the Phoenician world. Cultural practices crossed city boundaries. Religious festivals, though locally specific, followed similar patterns. Social customs regarding marriage, inheritance, and family life showed common characteristics. Commercial practices and maritime traditions united Phoenician sailors and merchants regardless of origin. This shared culture created a sense of common identity, despite political fragmentation. The question of when Phoenician identity ended lacks a simple answer. In the homeland, Hellenization gradually transformed the culture. By the Roman period, cities like Tyre and Sidon were thoroughly Hellenized, though some Phoenician cultural elements persisted. The Phoenician language survived into the early Christian era in some regions. St. Augustine, writing in the 4th century CE, mentioned that Punic was still spoken in North African rural areas. Carthage's destruction in 146 BCE eliminated the greatest Phoenician political entity, but cultural continuity continued. The Romans rebuilt Carthage as a Roman colony, and it became one of the empire's great cities. However, this was a Roman city, not a Phoenician one. The Punic culture gradually faded, absorbed into the broader Roman civilization. By the Islamic conquests of the 7th century CE, little remained of distinct Phoenician identity. For centuries, the Phoenicians existed primarily in ancient texts. Greek and Roman authors described them, often with ambivalence. They praised Phoenician skill and commercial acumen while denigrating them as greedy and deceitful. These biased accounts, written by competitors and eventual conquerors, shaped later understanding. Biblical accounts added another perspective, particularly regarding Phoenician interactions with ancient Israel. These texts preserved knowledge, but reflected their authors' viewpoints. Archaeological rediscovery began in the 19th century. Excavations at Phoenician sites revealed material culture complementing textual sources. The city of Carthage, destroyed so thoroughly by Rome, gradually emerged from earth and legend. Archaeologists uncovered harbors, houses, temples, and workshops. Artifacts illuminated daily life, religious practices, and commercial activities. Each discovery added pieces to the puzzle. Epigraphic evidence provided invaluable insights. Phoenician inscriptions, carved on stone or written on other materials, preserved their language and revealed aspects of governance, religion, and society. The most famous, the Eshmunazor sarcophagus inscription from Sidon, provides historical information about Phoenician kings. Bilingual inscriptions helped scholars decipher Phoenician writing, and understand the language better. Modern scholarship approaches Phoenician civilization with greater nuance than earlier generations. Researchers recognize the limitations and biases of ancient sources. Archaeological evidence receives primary emphasis, with texts providing context and complementary information. The Phoenicians emerge as sophisticated, innovative peoples who shaped Mediterranean history profoundly. Current excavations continue revealing new information. Underwater archaeology explores ancient shipwrecks and submerged harbor installations. DNA studies examine population movements and relationships. Technological advances like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery identify sites without excavation. Each year brings new discoveries, refining and sometimes revising understanding of Phoenician civilization. As our journey through Phoenician history draws to a close, we can appreciate their remarkable achievements. From their coastal cities, they ventured across unknown waters, establishing commercial networks that spanned the Mediterranean and beyond. Their ships carried not just trade goods but ideas, technologies, and cultural influences that enriched countless societies. The Phoenicians transformed communication through their alphabet, making literacy accessible and facilitating the spread of knowledge. They demonstrated that peaceful commerce could bring prosperity and influence, though they were also capable warriors when necessary. Their craftsmen created beauty and utility, setting standards that others strove to match. Their sailors expanded humanity's geographical knowledge, venturing where none had gone before. Perhaps most remarkably, they achieved all this without creating a centralized empire. The Phoenician model of independent city-states cooperating through cultural and commercial ties demonstrated an alternative to imperial conquest. Though ultimately absorbed by successive empires, they maintained their identity and influence for over a millennium. Today, when we write using alphabetic letters, we unknowingly honor those ancient merchants who simplified writing for practical purposes. When we admire purple as a royal color, we echo ancient associations with Tyrian dye. When we appreciate skilled craftsmanship, we continue traditions the Phoenicians exemplified. Their legacy lives on in subtle but profound ways. So as you drift toward sleep, picture those ancient harbors bustling with activity. Imagine sails on the horizon, bringing exotic goods from distant shores. Hear the languages of many lands mingling in marketplace conversations. See craftsmen bent over their work, creating objects of lasting beauty. The Phoenicians lived boldly, explored widely, and contributed generously to human civilization. Their story deserves remembrance. Let these images accompany you into peaceful rest. The Phoenicians have finished their earthly journey, but their spirit, adventurous, industrious, and innovative, continues inspiring us. Sleep well, knowing that human achievement, creativity, and courage have ancient roots, and that each generation builds upon foundations laid by those who came before. Good night, and may your dreams carry you across calm seas to distant, welcoming shores.